your continue working on your book of knowledge with Sacco and Vanzetti, Justice Denied. Okay. There were 2 people that did not pick up their books. Looks like my other class hours, so we should be good there. Okay. And then I'll get yours taken care of and graded by the end of the day. So if you want to swing back, you have it done, right? Okay, so the Jazz Age, right? Like, let's talk about something that, generally speaking, most students find some fun in, you know. But it's American history, right? So, I mean, it's not like it's without its negative elements. But there are still good things about it. Don't get so sad. It's okay. All right. But we have to be realistic about it, right? Okay. So, in the 1920s, right, the Jazz Age, sometimes we look at it and call it the Jazz Age, the Roaring 20s. Because we look at it as being this great time period in the United States of a great amount of boom. And while there is boom in the United States, there's also very quickly bust. But the vast majority of the bust isn't seen or felt by the majority of the U.S. until actually into the 1930s. Now, that does not mean that the American farmer will feel the same way. In fact, the American farmer, as we have seen from most economic downturns, they will see an economic downturn prior to the rest of the country seeing that same economic downturn. But the 1920s, largely, doesn't like me today, I guess, is a time period of prosperity. And business almost becomes like this glorified, almost religion, in a sense, in the United States. This is typified in numerous different books that are published during the time frame, as well as different things said by, for example, President Coolidge. One particular book is a book by the name, or written by a guy by the name of Bruce Barton. And the book's title is The Man Nobody Knows. And basically what he argues is that Jesus was the best businessman ever. Okay? Here's why. He says, okay, Jesus took 12 dudes. Nobody knew who these 12 dudes were. He doesn't call them dudes, by the way, because it's like, you know, the 1920s. But I'm going to call him a dude. Okay, so Jesus took 12 dudes that nobody knew, okay? And he took this religion that was nothing, right? I mean, like, nobody was practicing it, nothing, right? I mean, and obviously, most of us know, who have a little bit of knowledge about religious history, all know that Jesus was born a Jew, a Hebrew, right? Okay, so he decides that, hey, we're going to create this, and he takes these 12 people that nobody knows, and he takes those men, and he basically grows Christianity like a business. And takes it from where nobody knows what the heck it is to the dominant force in the world. Okay? And to be the largest religion in the world population. And he basically argues that there is this unequaled ability of Jesus to create this business. And that if you wanted to be a really good business dude, then you needed to study what Jesus did with the disciples, and if by doing so, you could basically create a business that would be similar in context to his. Yes, Miss Julia.
Who was it that did that?
His last name is Barton. Oh. Bruce Barton. Bruce Barton.
I'll remember that because I thought you were going to say, like, Bruce Banner.
No, not Bruce Banner. Bruce Barton, although that would be kind of cool, but no. Bruce Barton. Okay. Now, that does not mean, and speaking of Calvin Coolidge basically said that the man that builds a factory builds a temple. And the guy that works there worships there. So we can see that idea of business almost becoming like religion within the 1920s. So the regulation that occurs during the Progressive era, we will see that our presidents, Coolidge, Harding, and Hoover will actually remove a lot of that legislation. They will break up unions. They will allow for monopolies to once again take a strong hold, which, for a short period of time, creates immense prosperity in the United States. But we all know what comes next, right? Not so much.
I saved this picture a while ago, waiting for Calvin Coolidge to come up, and it's just like a fun fact about him. It says, former U.S. President Calvin Coolidge used to prank his bodyguards by pushing all the call buttons so everyone would come running and then hiding under his desk while they frantically searched for him. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Not surprising.
I would be.
He was supposedly actually like a pretty funny dude, but his nickname was Silent Cow because he never really said a whole lot of anything, like ever. So, but all the crazy things that we see, right? But there is still a lot of conflict, right? Despite that prosperity. In the 1920s, we will see a growing nativist sentiment in the United States. We will see the isolationist or isolationism grow, this idea that we were going to return to normalcy and what that would look like in a post-World War I era. And because of our fear of change, and because of our fear of immigrants, as well as because of race riots and in the northern cities, because of white men returning home to limited jobs in the north, we see that tensions will erupt, and we will see once again the growth of the Ku Klux Klan. Now, it doesn't help that we will also see the publication of D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which will glorify the Klan and help it to grow in size again, okay? As far as business goes, though, okay, urban culture basically becomes the landmark of American society during the 1920s. So, you guys are either currently reading Gatsby or almost done with Gatsby? You just finished Gatsby. Oh, you guys just started. Okay. Okay, so some of us are just getting in there, some of us are done with Gatsby, but that great Gatsby imagery is very typical of this time frame, okay? And so when you think about kind of what that would look like, it is, Gatsby will typify that. But the United States is urbanizing at an absolutely alarming rate. When we look at the numbers here, in 1800, only about 5% of the American population lived in an urban area, okay? By 1920, 50% of the American population will live in an urban area. Okay? Yeah, geez, right? Americans are moving into the urban areas at a very alarming rate, okay? Because America is becoming much more industrialized, and we are also seeing some things change with work. We are seeing a dramatic increase in the number of what we call white-collar jobs. What's a white-collar job?
Like a desk job.
Like an office, a desk job, right? Somebody, you go ahead and walk in front of it, that's all right, okay? Somebody that is not doing manual labor, right? A teacher would be considered white-collar, well, sometimes. But well, it's kind of like it depends on the level of education where you're at, okay? So like if you are high school, I would say is probably more blue collar, versus like being a professor is more like white collar. Does that make sense? So it just kind of depends because of pay. But we see that increase dramatically in the United States. So it increases by 38.1% with the number of white-collar workers in the United States. Now, when we look at that, the number of manual laborers, although it will increase, it doesn't increase nearly as dramatically, okay? It only increases 7.9%. So what you're seeing there is now we have a huge flux of Americans that are moving into the cities, but are also getting better paying jobs. And with better paying jobs, it means that Americans are going to be able to be greater consumers, which is perfect, because coming out of World War I, we have all of this product. We have stuff, right? We figured out in World War economic, scientific management, and of course the assembly line of Henry Ford. And so as an ability to be able to do that, we are seeing this huge age of prosperity. We come out of World War I, and the United States is the largest creditor nation. People owe us money. Again, this is a great thing for us for now, right? Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that the U.S. doesn't come out of World War I with a few kind of setbacks. Early in 1920, 1921, the United States enters a brief recession, largely because of the fact that World War I, you have a huge demand, right, and a limited supply. By the time that supply catches up to the demand drops. And so now we have a surplus of commodity. And so as a result of that, we see that there will be a little bit of an economic downturn. Well, a dude comes along, his name's Andrew Mellon. And he argues for what is called supply-side economic policy, right? Yeah, okay, and basically what he says is he's like, look, if we want to return to prosperity, pre-war prosperity and during the war prosperity, here's what we have to do. We have to use an economic policy that's called trickle-down economics, okay? And here's the basic idea of trickle-down economics. You give tax breaks to the dude at the very top. And what this dude will do with the extra profit that he makes because he's not paying in such high taxes is he'll take that and he's going to actually pay his worker more, okay, like his managers. And then what's going to happen is those blue-collar workers are going to get paid a little bit more, and then eventually those like low-skilled laborers, they're also going to get paid a little bit more eventually also, right? Trickle-down economics. Except,
it doesn't work like that.
it doesn't work like that.
What was this guy's name?
Mellon, Andrew Mellon.
Is it M? Was he
M-E-L-L-O-N, Mellon.
Mellon? Was he one of the dudes at the very top?
Yes, he was a dude at the very top. Okay?
Mellon.
Mellon, yeah.
Mellon.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't work in practice because the dudes at the top, as well as most every other person on the face of the earth, right? I mean, by nature, humans are selfish and greedy, right? And we like to have our money. So if I'm going to get more money, it's highly unlikely that I am actually going to implement trickle-down economics. So when even politicians today will argue that we need to give tax breaks to the wealthy because they will make sure that they will help to create jobs and yada, 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 right? I'm sure have all heard this argument at some point in time.
We reduce the taxes and then they'll get, at the top will get all the money except they'll keep most of it for themselves and then it might be a little bit might trickle down on your heads.
Yeah, a little bit might get it. The reality of it is it just does not really trickle down. But the idea is that it's going to do that, and so it does allow those industrial giants to produce more product. Now, the advantage of producing that product is that between 1922 and 1928, the U.S.'s industrial capacity will increase over 70%. So what's the advantage of increasing your capacity over 70%? What does that do to the price of goods? It drops dramatically. And so, well, yeah, this trickle-down economic system doesn't really work other than the fact that the price of commodities, of goods, of consumer products becomes so low that the average American can actually afford to buy a car. An average American can afford to buy this new fang-dangled thing called a washing machine. Okay?
Wow.
The average American can begin to afford things like toasters, electric toasters, because we've had toasters before, but you put them on a stove and they were iron and they'd heat it up and eventually they got hot enough that it would toast your bread, right? So, toast, okay? That's, yeah, okay. Now, we also had all sorts of new fandangled products that come out from this time frame as well. We'll also see that wages, although limited, okay, now here's the thing. Wages do increase, right? But they increase for those white-collar workers. These dudes down here are still predominantly not making a lot of money. But on average, American wages are at an all-time high. Right? Does that make sense? Because this basically stays the same, but because this increases just slightly, it causes the average to be skewed. Right? Yes? No? Kind of? So? Okay. All right. Electricity and the use of electricity is increasing dramatically. Okay? In fact, it increases over 19-fold during the 1920s. Okay? We see that at the outbreak of World War I, only about 20% of American homes had electricity. By 1930, over 70% of American homes have electricity. Now, this may not seem like that big of a deal, but think about everything that you use on an everyday basis that utilizes electricity. Okay, real quick, let's stop using electricity. I'm going to have to shut everything off, right? Yeah, everything's going off, okay? Yeah. But the reality of it is we use so much electricity on a daily basis that we don't even realize what it would be like to live without electricity. Things become so much easier. You can refrigerate food.
Well, when the power goes out, then you get like a taste and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but your refrigerator is probably still going to keep your food cold enough long enough that it's not going to go bad, right?
My fridge broke on Sunday. We just put it all in coolers and then put it on the deck and half of it froze.
Because it was winter time.
That was like mid-February.
Yeah, well that would work, right? But the reality of it is let's say it wasn't mid-February. It was July or August, right?
Yeah, that'd be bad.
Yeah, it would be bad, but you would just go to the store and buy some new stuff.
Yeah.
Not that big of a deal. But that's because of the innovation of the 1920s. Okay?
It's not really related, but like once we put like a thing of like Mountain Dew outside when it was like super cold outside, we put it in the snow. We brought it inside and I poured some and I put some ice in it and the ice turned to slush because it was so cold. It was really weird.
That's all. I've never seen it do that. But we begin to see these modern appliances. The refrigerator, okay? The electric stove, the vacuum. Now, I get it. It may not seem that big of a deal to have a vacuum, right? Because you've always had a vacuum. But even like with the car, when you guys were laughing at them trying to figure out how to drive the car, these things are like totally new. And they have no concept of what some of these things do. But think of it this way. If you had rugs in your house prior to the vacuum, how did you clean said rugs? You took them outside and you put them on a clothesline and you sat there and you beat them. And you beat the dust out of them. And obviously you didn't get nearly all the dust or all the hair or anything else out of them, or the germs or bacteria or whatever else, but you sat there and you beat them. And it was extremely labor intensive. It took a long period of time. With a vacuum, plug it into the wall, move it around a little bit. Okay, I'm done. Now what do I have to do with my time? Whatever I want to do, right? What you have to understand is that the 1920s and the appliances of the 1920s will open up a whole new world to American women. Okay? Because of the ability, married American women to now have additional time to do things, to not be so tied to the home. Okay? Now we will also see things become more efficient. Okay? We will see new technology, new electric motors, the use of the assembly line, using of lighter metals like aluminum and synthetic fibers. make things cheaper and lighter and faster to produce. We will see movies and radios. We will see all sorts of crazy electrical machines here. This is a toaster, a telephone, a waffle iron, okay? This is a dentist cleaning, tooth cleaning stuff, okay? Okay? Yes, okay? An iron, which again, even with an iron, the way you used to iron clothes is you would take an iron, which was made of iron, which is hence why it's called an iron, okay? And you would put it on the stove until it got nice and hot, and then you would use it to iron out and smooth out your clothes. And then, when it cooled down, you had to set it back on the stove until it got hot enough again to then iron out a little bit more of the clothes and back and forth.
Would it be, like, heavy?
They were heavy, and you could burn yourself on them relatively easily. The handles were made of wood, but still, it was easy for women to burn their hands on them, okay? And yes, they were heavy, okay? They were cumbersome, and it took forever, okay? You have electric tools. Think about it this way. When we see the advent of an electric tool, to be able to drill a hole using an electrified tool versus drilling a hole by hand, by cranking it around and boring out the hole, it takes production time from building a home to doing anything. From a very long, laborious process to a shorter process. And the shorter you can make that process, the cheaper products become. The cheaper the industries become. Now, with that, and with the rise of this new industry, in which the automobile is largely king, we see an increased consumer economy. Advertising and salespersons, okay, are probably the largest growth in any of the industry. If you have all these products, you have to sell them to people. Remember, we have a huge surplus of product coming out of World War I. You have to get people to actually buy your electric stove. You have to get people to buy your automobile because your people are like, I have no idea how to use this. I don't know how to drive it. I want to yell whoa to tell it to stop. Okay? Because that's what I do with a horse. And how does it not work that way?
We could do that now, though.
You probably could. We
We could
could
call
probably
it
get the
voice.
technology that would be voice activated.
Voice activated.
Okay.
Slow it down and just go like, whoa.
Yeah.
And then when you actually need, like,
When we
don't
don't
even
think
think
that's weird.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little odd,
That's
right?
cool.
But I mean, they're advertising right now a car on television that brakes if you forget to. What?
Yeah.
How do you know?
The cameras see cars coming up, and if you're not slowing down fast enough, it'll start to slow down for you.
Yeah.
That,
I don't know. Technology, right? And for like.
What if like a bird flies?
But what you have to realize is the change in technology is absolutely, the pace at which it was changing was astronomical. I mean, we're talking about technology that is taking thousands of years to develop. And in basically an instant, technology improves dramatically. People's lives are revolutionized by that technology. And so we have to sell that technology to people. We have to sell that consumer market. So we see advertising put out there to encourage the American consumer economy. Most salespeople were white men. They were college graduates, but that didn't mean that women weren't salespeople. There were female salespeople, although they outnumbered men, or men outnumbered them about 10 to 1. So the vast majority are white males, okay? They use persuasion. They use, the ideas that, hey, this is, by buying this range, it's going to make you a better cook. I don't think it works that way. But they used persuasion. They used the allure of the new fancy thing. They used the allure of, hey, your neighbor's got one, so don't you want one too? And of course, they used the age-old thing thing that they always use. Sex.
I knew it.
Oh, no.
No,
Okay.
okay, I was at, like, I don't think it was Valley Fair, and it was, like, someplace, and it was, like, the, it wasn't the Tilt-A-Whirl, some ride like that, and it was, like, winter themed, and there were, like, babes in bikinis, and I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Why in the winter, there's ski mountains on the, there's ladies in.
Wouldn't you be kind of cold?
Yeah, exactly.
But hey, if it gets people to buy stuff, right, why not, okay? The automobile industry is arguably king. Now, we talked about this before, but before the assembly line, a car every 12 hours. After, a car every 10 to 12 seconds. It is absolutely remarkable the way that the assembly line will dramatically change not only the auto industry, but every other industry as well. Now, Detroit then becomes the leader of the automobile industry, largely because of Henry Ford locating his plant there. There soon becomes multiple other car companies. We see Chrysler, we see Chevrolet, a bunch of ones that don't exist anymore. So there are tons. Oops, sorry, covered over that. But as a result, also we see other industries boom out of that as well. Now, Henry Ford is an innovator. He is an innovator using the assembly line, but he's also an innovator when it comes to his workforce. If you remember from the video that we saw yesterday, Henry Ford employed both whites and blacks. He paid his workers the same amount. In fact, he paid them 5 times more than was the average in the industry. He paid them $5, okay? $5. Now, to us, it's like, $5? I don't want to do anything for $5. But you have to understand how huge that is during the 1920s.
Is that like per hour or
Per day.
Per day or
Per day. But if you think about that, I mean, I don't know, somebody could pull up a inflation calculator and figure out how much it would be today, but I don't know how much it is today. He creates his sociological department. And this here is in his, basically his village that he created for the people there near his Detroit plant. And he allowed people to live there, but he had very strict rules. You couldn't rent out any of the extra rooms. He sent people in to investigate into their homes to make sure they were following the rules, okay? That men and women were complying with his very much white Anglo-Saxon Protestant ideals. That men and women were not cohorting with each other outside of the marriage, okay? And if you did, you could be fired or disqualified from extra pay. But the automobile will revolutionize America.
it's $62.
$62 a day?
Yeah,
Wow.
62.57.
So, yes, ma'am.
In my National Geographic magazine, there was an article about rubber, and apparently Henry Ford tried to make a rubber plantation in like Brazil or something, and so he like had all set up to have a whole village down there and like a perfect society, and he planted the trees, but they all died because he didn't hire a rubber botanist. So, like, because rubber comes from trees, and that land wasn't suited for rubber trees,
Yeah.
so it completely
Failed.
failed.
Okay.
And it cost
Or
like
not actually, no,
$22 million.
I
So now it's just kind of there and empty and stuff.
Yeah, it didn't work.
I just thought that.
But it's innovation, right? And the reality of that innovation is these guys took a lot of risk to try to have something more. Now, the reason why Henry Ford wanted to even be able to have a rubber plant was because that it would make him to be able to create cheaper tires to make his car cheaper. He believed truly that every American should be driving a Model T. That every single one of his factory workers should make enough that they could buy one of the cars that they were producing. Now, of course, it has a good side and a positive for him as well. It's basically a cyclical thing. If your workers are able to purchase the car, guess what? You're selling more, you're getting more money into your pocket, right? I mean, so...
And they'll make sure they're doing it right.
Exactly.
It's
So
also
it
good PR.
works. What's that?
Also probably good PR.
It is good PR, yes.
So like if he owns like the tire, like the rubber plant for his wheel, is that like one of those integration?
Yes, if he would have owned he would have had to buy out some additional things like some glass companies and things like that. But if he would have been able to own all of the inputs, it would have been vertical integration. Does that make sense? So yeah, but he was never able to achieve vertical integration. He tried, but he failed. And but he truly believed in that. Now, the vast majority of Americans don't have enough money sitting in their pocket to just go out and buy all these consumer products. So how do they pay for it? Well, they pay for it with this new fang-dangled thing called credit. Okay? And so banks would loan them credit, businesses would loan them credit. You could buy your automobile for 5 easy payments of $4.99. I don't know what it was exactly, but I'm just making that up. But it was made with so many payments of $4.99. Why not just say, if we're going to say 5 easy payments of $4.99, why don't we just say, hey, it's going to cost you $25? Well, because A, you may have a hard time paying for $25, but it sounds a whole lot better, right? Hey, that's not so bad. I can swing that. I can do that. I can pay for that. Well, then the next thing comes along. 3 easy payments of $2.99. Oh, I can afford that. I can buy that.
And it's never $3, it's always $2.99.
Yeah, exactly.
Generally, it's not. Why? Because $2.99 sounds cheaper than $3, and it is by a penny, but in our brain, it sounds a lot better, right?
Oh my gosh.
And so it's an,
everything.
yeah, and so it's an advertising ploy.
I saw a thing once on TV that was just like 4 easy payments of 59 something. I'm like, that is not easy.
Well, I know, but if you think about it, if you had to shell out that $250 or whatever it was, right, and just straight up pay that $250, you probably wouldn't buy it. Now, it's because of the 1920s that we now have credit cards. Flat out. Now, obviously, back then, they don't have a piece of plastic that you can run that credit on, but you could basically have store credit at JCPenney, at Sears, at any other place. It just, you didn't get a little plastic card, okay? But you had to pay them back. But it allowed for you to purchase products that otherwise people wouldn't be able to pay for. Now, that's all good as long as you can pay it back eventually, right? So as long as you have a job where you're making an income, it's fine if you buy on credit. Now, if you buy too much on credit, there's no way that you will ever be able to make the payments, the 3 easy payments or 4 easy payments, because you have too many 2, 3, 4, 5 easy payments to make, right? And it also means that once you are in debt, you always have to have a source of income. You lose your job, now you have no ability to be able to pay that credit back. But for now, it's the roaring 20s, right? Consumer economy, everything is good. The market is going to continue to grow. It's called the long bull market. Everything is good forever. We are never going to have an economic depression ever again. Yay, go 1920s, okay? It is not the only place that America will find innovation, though. America will also see innovation in flight as well. Now, on December 17th of 1903, the Wright brothers will launch the first manned flight. Their plane will launch out of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, and that flight will last a mere 12 seconds.
But it was a flight.
It was a flight, and it goes 120 feet for those 12 seconds. But it was a flight, right? It worked. The technology worked. Now, World War I, we adapt the technology, we begin to use it more and more in World War I, but in World War I it's still pretty limited, okay? For most, in most senses, the planes that are in World War I were used for spying purposes only,
They're flammable.
okay? And they are flammable, and the wings are made of fabric, so when you shot a hole through the wing, it's going down,
Yeah.
okay? So they weren't very effective by any means, but like with anything, hey, war causes innovation.
Yeah.
That's not working. I don't like my planes getting shot down. How do I make it better, right? How do I fix this so my planes don't get shot down? How do I make a tank better because these tanks take too stinking long to turn around? How do I make it so that I can kill people in the trenches because this whole trench warfare isn't working for me? Oh, mustard gas. I like that idea. Okay?
Yes.
Machine guns. I like that idea. Okay? That's where the vast majority of innovation will come from. It doesn't matter what time frame we're looking at. Innovation that comes out of war will be subsequently used in industry. Okay? Now, we take that innovation that comes out of World War I, and after World War I, we begin to start using planes for air mail, for passenger air mail. Excuse me. The first transcontinental air service then will fly in 1920 from New York to San Francisco, okay, taking mail. By the 1930s and 40s, the United States has regularly scheduled air flights, okay, for both commercial as well as passenger usage, okay? Now, here's the thing though, that's within the United States. And so we have to try to figure out also, how are we going to connect the rest of the globe? How are we going to fly across the world? And so a dude by the name of Charles Lindbergh comes along.
His baby was kidnapped today.
Yes, it was.
On this day in history.
On this day in history, sure was.
Oh, that one.
Taken out of the window. The ladder remained leaning up against the home. They hunted for the baby for a very long time. Eventually, I think they found the baby's body, if I remember correctly, but it's quite a while. And they still don't know. Best guess is modern forensics is that the baby probably died shortly after being removed from the home. So whether they dropped the baby as they were trying to carry it down the ladder or what, they don't really know. But the baby died, so.
To get money, right?
To get money, it was for a ransom, yeah. Okay.
Because Lindbergh was famous.
Yeah, Lindbergh becomes America's first huge celebrity as a result of his transatlantic flight. So Lindbergh, flying the Spirit of St. Louis, in 1927 will launch the first solo transatlantic flight. It lasts 39 hours and 39 minutes. And he launches himself into an American icon. So he will become the first one to launch that solo flight. Okay? Now, on May 20th through 21st of 32, then, Amelia Earhart will cross from Newfoundland to Ireland, becoming the first female to do that. The plane has a dramatic impact on American civilization. Not only are we more closely linked, but we see Americans using air travel more commonly than using cars, because quite frankly, cars and road travel at this point in time was very, very dangerous. Cars were getting faster. As they said in the video, with the ability to soup up these engines, cars were able to travel at 70 miles per hour. Not all cars, but they were getting there. And there were no safety concerns or regulations. There are no seat belts. There are no speed limits on the roadways. There are no really rules for driving. technology always will outpace the legal system. Period.
Yep.
And it was outpacing the legal system. And so Americans were dying in large numbers on the American highways. Air travel was safer, albeit more expensive, but it was safer and it was faster. Of course, it also has the impact that air travel will be also, and planes will be used for a much more dramatic effect during the course of World War II. A much more devastating effect during World War II. Now, if we want to talk about culture, we have to be able to spread that culture. And so the best way to do that is through the radio and the movies. Okay? Now, the radio was actually invented by an Italian inventor, Marconi, in the 1890s. Okay?
Oh, Marconi plays the Mamba from freaking, like We Built This City. I'm sorry, I just thought of the lyrics, like, from We Built This City.
Okay.
The song. It's like Marconi plays the Mamba. It's the guy I think. Okay.
Yeah. But it's mostly used for long-range communications during World War I, right? Again, the need for it in the military will cross into the civilian life when war isn't there, okay? But the first voice-carrying radio in the United States came in November 1920 when KDKA out of Pittsburgh carried news of Harding winning the landslide election in 1920. We will see from KDKA, we will see numerous other organizations be built around that, including the National Broadcasting Corporation in 1926, the Columbia Broadcasting Corporation in 1927, NBC and CBS. It's those dudes, okay? Yes, I know it's CBC, but they change it to S because it becomes Columbia Broadcasting Services instead of corporation, okay? So, we see them grow through that. Most of them will put on what are called soap operas, and they're called a soap opera because they were actually like, they were sponsored by soap companies. So they would go into a commercial during these dramas, and they would advertise like Dove soaps. And so then the operas, or the plays, the shows, became known as soap operas.
I love
And that's where we get our soap operas, okay?
That's the best.
But radio creates a bustling industry, okay? Families would listen to the radio much like you would sit down and maybe watch television with your family today. Well, maybe not anymore because people have TVs and devices everywhere, okay? But when I was your age, we had one television in our house. One, I know, way back in the day, in the olden days. I'm not that old, but we only had one TV in our house, okay? And one computer, and they were in the same room, so.
It's like in Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I have 2 TVs.
Whoa.
It has 2 TVs.
Yeah.
I love that
I
movie.
felt really old. Okay, anyways, but it revolutionizes technology. We see radio stations increase dramatically. There are 220 stations that developed within a mere 18 months. The first radios were anywhere from $50 to $150, okay? And so it becomes one of those things, much like the automobile, that becomes a fixture within the American home, okay? By 1922, 3 million American homes had a radio in them. Of course, the purchase of those radio sets, the accessories, everything that you would need to run them, it is $1 million industry. In 1922, $60 million. 1923, $136 million. 1929, $852 million is spent in the radio industry. There was nothing else save the motion picture that spread American culture, whether it was through the soap operas, through westerns, through comedies like Amos and Andy, advertising, political functions, newscasts, sporting events, etc. Through these images, you can kind of see what happens here. So here's the clear channel stations are the ones in pink, and then local and then both. Oh, I thought I was going to show more than that. Okay. The emergence of the movie industry also has a huge dramatic impact on the rest of the culture of the United States. In 1930, weekly admissions into the movies is about 100 million people are going to the movies every single week. Now, that's dramatic because there's only 123 million Americans.
Wait, what was the number?
100 million people are going to the movies. Every week, there are 123 million Americans.
Oh my god, everybody but me.
Okay?
What's up with those
Now,
people?
that doesn't mean that there are some people that are going more than one time, some people that are going once, etc., right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's just those one particular people that are going. I'm going to come back to this here for just a second, okay? But we see that increase dramatically. Vaudeville, the theater, almost become effectively dead in the United States. Why go to the theater when you can go to a movie? Right? Right? I know, my theater people, I know. The movie industry will earn 10 times more than the sports industry will earn. And it will employ, in 1920 alone, over 325,000 people. It not only exemplifies American culture, but it largely will create American culture. Silent movies starring Charlie Chaplin, okay, and Emma Pickford. Emma Pickford is known for her work in D.W. Griffith's movies, including The Birth of a Nation. Talkies that will eventually come out, like Al Johnson's The Jazz Singer. Okay, Al Johnson, the jazz singer. Al Johnson plays a man in blackface. So,
And so does Robert Downey Jr.
what's that?
So.
I don't know. I didn't hear what you said.
Robert Downey Jr. played a character in blackface as well.
Yeah. But The Jazz Singer becomes the first talkie, and it's released in 1927. From then on, the silent movie actors, they really start to lose their way. But when I talk about it changing American culture, it will have a vast impact on American culture. And in some cases, a negative impact on American culture. Hopefully this will work. It's a silent film. There is music behind it I should put on. So you would actually have a sound reel that would play, and then you'd have the film separate. We'll pick up with this when we get back tomorrow. Or rape and pillage her. Or white woman. Oh, here comes the savior. We'll pause it. I'll show it the rest of you. Help me, help me. I'm a poor lady. What? We'll pull it up here in a little bit. Okay?
She'll go home later than this.
Yes. And I don't know if there's any relation whatsoever at all. Andy Griffith is in like,
show.
Andy Griffith's show is in the 50s.
How come they didn't show what they were saying before, but then like when he started running after her, they just saying what he was saying?
The captions don't always
Yeah.
line up perfectly.
Yeah, because it's a silent film. So like they would go like, and then they'd be like, it's on. Then it'd show it a little bit after, and then a little bit of what he was saying. So you kind of had an idea of what was going on, but you didn't
Yeah.
really know what was going on.
So it's why I like The Music Man.
Yeah.
It's a transition from silent movie to
Silent
real
to
time.
talkie.
And then it's like, the woman, she's really pretty and it works really well for a silent movie, but her voice is just great.
Horrible. Which is why they stopped acting.